Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We're thrilled to have you all with us. My name is Gesha. I'm the Impact and Community Officer at 51 Labs. And today we have the amazing Ellie joining us. She is a high-performance coach, certified master neuroplastician, a best-selling author and speaker. Elizabeth has collaborated with global organizations like the Zuckerberg Institute. So today she'll be bringing a unique blend of neuroscience and business awareness to empower entrepreneurs. And in today's session, she will be sharing valuable insights on goal setting, strategies for adjusting your goals and your approach, and practical tips for success in your entrepreneurial journey. Her approach may be challenging to common beliefs, but she will be offering a fresh perspective on positivity and resilience. And without further ado, Ellie, please feel free to jump in and introduce yourself.
Oh, look, thank you so much. I mean, I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship and opportunity, and I think goals is an area that can really trip you up in as much that when you start on your journey, it's a bit like you plan to go to a new city for the first time, and you plan on what you're going to see, and you plan about how you're going to get there. But the reality can be a little different. And I think the entrepreneurship journey is a little like that. You think you know how it's going to turn out, but there can be unexpected events that can derail you. And then you start to question, well, should I be doing this at all? So I'm really excited to talk about goals today. Gesha, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying, just to go into the topic and kind of dive into it, maybe we should go over what are goal setting, what are SMART goals, and what are the key components of the SMART goals? How can entrepreneurs apply the SMART criteria to ensure an effective goal setting in their ventures?
Look, I think the SMART goal formula is a really great place to start. I mean, SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but basically it's like, it's defining more than I have a dream. It's like, I'm going to do this in this way, with this result, at this time, with this deliverable. And I think that's an amazing place to start. I think the challenge is that when you are a new entrepreneur, that you can make assumptions along the way. You can think that, well, this is achievable, and maybe underestimate the time it takes or overestimate the customer take up. So I think setting goals is an absolute foundation. And I know through 51 Labs and Orange Corners that, you know, this is a key part of the process. But I think you set your goals, you have a framework, and SMART is a really good place to start. But sometimes you have to go back and reassess that.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of times, like you plan ahead for a lot of things to do with your goals, but things don't seem to be going that way. Um, so basically, what I'm trying to say is like, what is the difference between planning for your business concept and actually executing it?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I think when you're an entrepreneur, you have an idea, and and what is attached is how you believe everyone will react to that idea. And usually it's kind of more hopeful than it works out. So you have an idea about new service, and because you think that new service or new product is amazing, you think that everyone will really be excited about taking up that idea. Well, quite often they're not as quick to take up that idea as you thought. So that's where reassessing the SMART goal comes in. Because when you set a goal, and you set a time frame, if you don't achieve that time frame, it's really easy to say, well, I've done the wrong thing. I've picked the wrong product. I've picked the wrong service. I thought that 100, 500, 50, 10 people would have been interested in my product by now. So I'm just going to give it all up. And that's not the right way to approach it, because sometimes it just takes a little bit longer to achieve that goal. And I think that's where early entrepreneurs, usually entrepreneurs start something that's close to their heart. So, for example, I met someone recently who loved chess. So he had based a new product on chess. Well, I don't like chess. I'm not sure what the market is for chess. So you assume because you like something, or maybe it's makeup, or maybe it's cake, or maybe it's, all sorts of things that you like in your personal life. But that doesn't necessarily mean the market likes it as much as you do. So when you come to your SMART goal and you set it, there's a moment of stepping back and thinking, okay, well, I've thought about this in an abstract sense. It's a bit like describing, so if I was to say to you, if you've never tried ice cream, and I'm describing ice cream to you, and I've said it's amazing, it's cold, it's sweet, it's delicious, and then you try some, and maybe you don't like cold, and you don't like sweet. So it's that balance between, okay, I'm putting a product or service out into the world, and I have this view that everyone's going to like it, but that doesn't necessarily happen. And that's when the first start of how do you know when to adjust your goals actually occurs.
Yeah, and I think as we'll discuss later during the session, sometimes you do plan ahead for it, but there are, outside components that interfere or, become an obstacle for you. But if that's not the case, so in situations where an entrepreneur sets too high of a goal to achieve, or when entrepreneurs fall significantly short of their goals, where should they begin the assessment process? Like, when do you know it's the right time to go over what you have planned and maybe consider, adjusting what you've been doing?
I love that question, and I hate that question at the same time, because I believe that entrepreneurs will lead the world and make the change. So there's no such thing as dreaming too big. However, there is implementing things one step at a time. So you may have this incredible view to change the world up here, but you need to implement down here. So if your original idea isn't working out, then you look back at, okay, so how was I implementing? Implementation is the secret sauce of entrepreneurship. So you can have the best idea in the world that is poorly implemented. I'm trying to think of an example right now, but I think the most important thing is when you set your goals to really break down the implementation into bite-sized pieces. So one thing I see very much with entrepreneurs is they assume that their team, which are usually employees, their team will have the same vision that they have. Well, there's a big difference between being an entrepreneur and being part of a team. And when you engage a team, they may not actually want to work 24 hours a day like you do, and they may not want to live in one room and eat beans or whatever it does that, entrepreneurs really make enormous personal sacrifices to see their dreams come true. So it becomes a point where when you get an organization together, that you acknowledge, okay, we need to break this down into bite-sized pieces. This is the first thing we have to do. And the second thing, entrepreneurs are really, really great at having high-level ideas. They're not so great at breaking it down into manageable steps. And that's why one of my pieces of advice to entrepreneurs is never hire someone exactly the same as you. So even if we look at, for example, something accessible is the WeWork documentary on Netflix. So WeWork was a really interesting unicorn in the tech space, but it was a business where they developed office space. They grew, the founder grew to many millions of dollars and was very, very successful. And he was a visionary, but his second person, his 2IC, we would say, was an accountant. And the accountant was behind the scenes crunching the numbers, saying, this will work, this won't work, this whatever. So when you're scaling, when you're building a business, and you need a team behind you. You really need to have someone who is different from you, who can say, okay, we need to break this down into bite-sized pieces. You're the visionary, you can see the horizon, you can see the big picture, but you need someone behind you who can say, okay, let's do this first, and if that works, let's do this, and if that works, let's do that. So you make sure that your SMART goals are very, very achievable.
Yeah, and so this question may be a little similar to this, but I think it's kind of crucial to go over it in more detail. So in situations like this, how can an entrepreneur identify those areas where they may have overestimated or made assumptions, to what they're going to be achieving? So how do you basically identify or categorize those areas where you need to readjust or go back to?
Sure. I love that. So I think this goes back to the parts of a SMART goal which are measurable and achievable. So most of the entrepreneurs I've met overestimate what they can personally achieve. So working 24 hours a day, putting in enormous personal effort is not sustainable. And I think when a lot of entrepreneurs start out, they think they can achieve much more because they believe they can work much harder than is actually physically possible. And that's really, really sad to me, because that's when burnout occurs. And that's when entrepreneurs start out often with a really great idea and a really great concept, but maybe they underestimate external factors like, let's say, planning permission. Let's say you want to open a shop or you want to open a brick and mortar business. Planning permission to extend to the shop front, or they overestimate how quickly it will be to find suppliers, and they get really, really disheartened. And I think that's when you need to, I mean, this whole seminar is about how do you know when you need to adjust your goals. So I think going back to that element of the SMART goal and saying, okay, I thought this was achievable. What I know now that I've actually tried to implement my idea and carry it out commercially, was it actually achievable? And if you have to change it from 3 months to 6 months, if you have to change it from 1 supplier to 5 suppliers, that's fine. That's not failure. That's just going back and thinking, okay, implementation is different from what I thought it would be. And that's actually okay. I mean, there's a lot of talk in the entrepreneur world about pivoting, and I'm very passionate about pivoting without pain. If you have an amazing idea and you build a business case on that idea and it all looks great, and then when you take it to the market and the market says a whole range of things, it's too fast, it's too slow, it's too complicated, the market's not ready, an internal upheaval occurs in the country which makes it difficult to get distribution, that's not actually a failure for the entrepreneur, that's a pivot. And pivoting is actually really normal and actually part of the entrepreneurial journey. So I would say out of the thousands of entrepreneurs that I have mentored or coached or spoken with, I would say less than 10% didn't have to pivot. So 90% had to pivot from their original SMART goal based on the market circumstances, whatever. And that's actually okay. I think where I see entrepreneurs fail, and it breaks my heart, is that they had a really, really great idea, which was fantastic for this market in this time, in this point in history. And then everything changed, but they stick to it. And it's like, everything's moved on, and it's okay for you to change as well.
Yeah, I mean, usually there are a lot of things that affect your idea or your business that I think entrepreneurs should be okay with the fact that things change or you change along the way. It's like the part of growth of you and your startup. But moving to another topic, sometimes what you do plan out are affected by outside factors, and these can affect your goals. So if we can go over what are the external factors that can affect your goals, and how can entrepreneurs be mindful of that?
Okay, external factors. I think it's not just external factors, it's unexpected external factors. So things can change, like a political climate, an economic climate, an environmental climate. I mean, when the 2020 and the pandemic hit, I closed 3 businesses, just closed them. It wasn't going to work. And I delayed the launch of my book, Feeling Forwards, by 6 months because I wasn't really sure. And that's okay. I mean, well, I didn't enjoy it at the time, but you always, as an entrepreneur, need to be prepared to pivot. What I coach in my high performance coaching is, the question always is, where's the opportunity? So if you have a great product and something happens externally to affect that, instead of, okay, this is terrible, where's the opportunity? So what's a really good example of that? So, okay, so let's talk about YouTube. So YouTube, not many people know, and I would ask everyone, but I can't see the chat. So YouTube started out as a video dating site. Obviously, it didn't work because that's not now what YouTube does. But for whatever reason, and I don't know the circumstance at the time, but they thought, okay, well, where's the opportunity? So we've got this incredible video capacity. We've got this incredible streaming capacity. No one wants our video dating service. So what else can we do? So I think when circumstances change, it's the entrepreneurial magic is not focusing on the circumstances that have changed. It's where's the opportunity. What's another one? I think what was so interesting was, so actually at the moment, I read an article in the New York Times today. So we're all very conscious in the last 2 years or 3 years, that food waste causes incredible environmental damage. The rotting food, who knew? So there's this new app in New York at the moment whereby you can, cafes and restaurants who have leftover food, advertise at heavily discounted prices, please pick up this food. So it's a new opportunity there, which is really, really interesting. So instead of, let's say, if there was a trend to eat out less, or there was a trend to not go out because of economic reasons, it's like, okay, well, that's the trend, but at the same time, we can offer this benefit in terms of environmental protection. So we're going to do this. So there are always external factors. You cannot control external factors. And I see so many entrepreneurs crushed by, well, this has changed and that's changed, or even to the extent of exporting. You have a good that you wanted to export, the laws change, or you have a therapeutic good, like it's soap or oil or whatever, and the laws change. Well, where's the opportunity? That's where entrepreneurs can really shine through.
Yeah, definitely. And if we can maybe talk about a different example related to this. So, for example, if we take the pandemic, I think that was something, an external factor that no one had like seen it coming. But also, since because it was new, no one knew how to approach it. So maybe for things that are less impactful as that one, or something that does have its own significance, how can entrepreneurs assess the longevity and the like a long-term impact of what this external factor is, and how they can make sure that they're ready for something like that coming their way?
Well, I don't think you're ever ready. I think the essence of being an entrepreneur is to be nimble. I think you see the most successful entrepreneurs I've seen are people who see an opportunity, maximize it, but then move on in 3 to 5 years' time. So let's say, I mean, food is a great one. So there can be a trend in food. So at the moment, Melbourne, my hometown in Australia, Melbourne apparently is the world's biggest vegan city. We have a society that is embracing vegan food the most. So if you're an entrepreneur, you might think, okay, I'm going to start a vegan cafe or do this or do that. The interesting thing about trends is they always change. So, like fashion. So, one year it's high-waisted jeans, 3 years later it's low-waisted jeans. It's always a reaction. It always changes. So, if you're an astute business person, say in Melbourne at the moment, you would open a vegan cafe and then you would build up your clientele and maybe you would sell it in 2 years' time, because you would know that the next trend could be carnivore, or it could be paleo, or it could be something else. Because one thing the human race is very good at is changing its mind and wanting something new. So whatever the trend is, it's going to change in 3 to 5 years. So I think entrepreneurs are different from business people. So a business person may be looking to build a business that will still be delivering revenue in 5, 10, 20 years' time. A true entrepreneur will go through different businesses and different cycles, 3, 5, 7, 12 years. But that's okay, because if you're an entrepreneur and you can potentially, for example, build a business in a certain, let's go back to the vegan cafe. Okay. You build a vegan cafe in Melbourne. It's known as the best vegan cafe in Melbourne. So once you have that business for 3, 5, 7 years, you pretty much no longer an entrepreneur, you're a business person, and that's great. So you make sure that that stays the best vegan cafe in Melbourne for that period of time, and that's fantastic. But a true entrepreneur will look at the trends and they will look at the opportunity. They will move in, they will maximize it, they will establish it, and then they'll either keep it as a business or they'll sell it to someone else and then try something different.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at it, actually. Um, so if we can go to a different topic, maybe, and I think we went over this during the session, but maybe if we can dive into it a little bit more in detail. How does the entrepreneurial journey shape individuals, and how might this influence their goal adjustment?
Yeah, well, look, being an entrepreneur is an amazing experience, but it's also pretty tough because you're trying something new. You're creating something new. It's like there's so many examples of being an entrepreneur that are maybe not traditional, but if you are an artist, every time you paint a new painting, you're presenting something new to the world. You're being very entrepreneurial in that space. So being an entrepreneur can be a little tough from a personal perspective because you are sailing into uncharted waters. You're like an explorer. You're saying, I think this is what everyone should be wearing or eating or software or whatever. So that can be a little bit daunting, but also it can get a little bit exhausting. And where I come in is that I'm very passionate about entrepreneurs surviving emotionally, because it can be very hard to develop a new product and knock on doors every day. So it's very important you set your goals, which is what we're talking about. You set your goals and you set some parameters, but those goals may move, and it's very important to seek out people. Particularly, one thing is great with being part of 51 Labs and Orange Corners is that you get some colleagues and some friends and some people who are going through exactly the same journey as you. So it's very important to maintain your emotional health during this time, and to understand that if you're creating something new, it's very, very different, and your friends and family around you may not necessarily understand exactly what you're going through, but to find your tribe. And I think that's where organizations like 51 Labs and the program you're running through Orange Corners is really important, because you can sit down, you can speak with other entrepreneurs and say, look, I've had this idea, I set my goals, it's not necessarily working out the way I thought. How are you going? And you'll find out that nearly every single other entrepreneur is experiencing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of the times that's the case, even during their programs, like even at the early stages of their entrepreneurial journey. So basically, we have talked about all of the components of goal setting and, you know, outside factors and everything. But when should startups kind of be like, okay, now it's the right time that I should go back to what I've set for myself, and basically go over it and redo some parts of it? Like, what is the right time to know this is the right thing to do, and it's not like, just impatience or stress overcoming you?
Yeah, no, I love that you've said that. That's a really great question. I think there's a real balance between responding and reacting. So what I mean by that is, let's say, so maybe a reasonable period of time is, say, like 3 months. So you set your goals, you work on them for 3 months, you do everything, you implement everything you said you would, and then you sit back and say, well, actually, how are we going? I think there's a number of factors. So look at, maybe if you've set your goals and it's not working, look back and see, I make an assumption? Did I make an assumption about the customer? So for example, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that they get so in love with their product. They think, oh my God, this product is so good, everyone's going to love it. And customers say, I'm not quite sure about this, and they dismiss it. So let's say you've been trading for 3 months is a good period of time, and your customers are telling you, I really, really love this, but I don't care about that. Because it's very difficult to put yourself in the shoes of a customer. You assume what they want. You do your research, obviously. You reach out to a number of customers, but a lot of entrepreneurs, the potential customers they start out with are their friends and family who say really lovely things. And it's not always really accurate. So when you go out into the wider community and you get customers who really don't even know you, and they say, well, I'd really like to see more of that, that is absolute gold. Any feedback from customers at that stage is incredible. And then you start to think, for example, I met a potential entrepreneur recently who said, well, I really love to do this in my spare time. So I've devised a product about this particular thing that I'm going to sell. And what they described as what they love to do in their spare time, I would rather stick a fork in my eye. It was something that so totally didn't appeal to me. And I'm like, well, that's lovely, but you've made an assumption. You've made an assumption that just because you love to do something in your spare time, that there are a lot of other people that love to do that, and then you build a product. So once you've got your product in the market, you've gone through all the incredible things that 51 Labs do, and then customers start to tell you, just please listen to them. Customers will tell you, and if you don't like what they're telling you, it's probably the truth. So that's when you can go back and think, okay, maybe I need to change.
Definitely. I think that sounds like very right to the situation. And for my questions, I think this is it for now, but I wanted to give enough time for the startups joining us today to ask their questions. I know in the registration form, we, left them a section where they can ask all the questions they had. And while some of them were, very much related to the topics that we were discussing today, so apologies if we're not going to go over them. It's because we were going to discuss it during the session. But there were a couple of questions that actually sounded very interesting. Someone asked, how will adjusting our goals impact our resources, timeline, and priorities?
That's a great question, but it depends how you're going to adjust your goals. I mean, every time you adjust your goals, and you should actually adjust your goals, there's not a single successful business on the planet. For example, the example I gave earlier about YouTube. So YouTube started out as a video dating organization. So imagine how they had to adjust their resources and their objectives and their time frame once they realized that presumably their video dating sucked and no one wanted it. So they had to pivot. So I think it depends on, firstly, how far away, so how much you have to pivot from your goals. So let's say you have, and I'm just imagining things here. Let's say you started an interior design business and you thought that everyone wanted to know about colors and textures and cushions and wallpaper and whatever. But once you started the business, you found out that people wanted you to do the wallpaper and the cushions and all of that. But what was more of a priority was getting the trades in to do that in the time frame. So they wanted to buy your interior design concept only if it was 4 weeks instead of 8 weeks like the competition. Well, then you have to pivot, and then you have to look at what you change. So I think, to answer the question, it's not about what changes do I have to make. It's more about, okay, if I'm pivoting from the original product or the original direction, what is the pivot? And then how does that impact how I deliver the product?
Sounds great. Another questions that we got from the forum, it says, what are some obvious setbacks or traffic that startups should take into consideration?
Oh, wow. Okay. From a personal perspective, everyone overestimates how much they personally can do because you're excited. You're in love with your idea and you just want to get going. And that's exactly how it should be. Every entrepreneur should be passionate and excited. It's a journey, it's a voyage of discovery. It's amazing. But that means you potentially overestimate how much time you have, particularly if you're starting out as a side hustle. So yeah, you can overestimate that. And then I've never, ever, ever met an entrepreneur who said, oh my goodness, the customers bought much more than I thought they would. Most of the time, customers take a little bit longer to come on board with the product or service than you hoped. Because when you're an entrepreneur, and it's such a beautiful thing, but you know your product or service so well, you know the benefits, you know the incredible difference it's going to make. You're so excited, but the customer has to either be in exactly the same place as you from a personal perspective, or they have to understand, they have to have the same level of understanding about the benefits as you. Customers take a lot longer to come on board than you think they will, and that doesn't mean you've got a bad product, and that doesn't necessarily mean you should pivot, but it's just one of those laws, you know. Let's say, for example, you have a great experience at a gym or a facial, or you go and buy cake at the most amazing shop, and you tell 5 friends about the experience you've had. Chances are less than one, or maybe one, will follow your recommendation. Well, it's the same with starting a new business, and that's okay.
So after this, I want to actually give a lot of time to the questions that everyone is asking in the chat. I don't know if you can see it, but we are getting a lot of questions right now.
Awesome.
Yes, so Shanga is asking, dreaming big makes me struggle in adopting with the market and a lot of disappointments. So does that mean I should pivot?
Well, disappointments are always horrible, and it's hard. I think, what are the messages through the disappointments? Is it that you're putting out an offer that no one's taking up? Is it that you have a product or service that people are criticizing? I think I'd like to know, maybe we come back to this question and maybe they can email, message some more information, but what are the disappointments? If you put out an offer that no one takes up, and believe me, every entrepreneur has been there. I know it feels like you're the only one, but you're not. So if you put out an offer and no one takes it up, there's a whole range of reasons why. Did you pitch it to the wrong kind of customer? Did you pitch it on the wrong platform? Did you price it too much or too little? Sometimes if something is very inexpensive, people think it's not worth it. So there's a whole range of factors to that. So I'm sorry, I don't necessarily feel like I've answered that question exactly, but maybe we get some more information.
Definitely. Guys, feel free to ask any questions, or if you have follow-up questions, please feel free to add them. In the meantime, Andy is asking, as we know, most of entrepreneurs are crazy in love with their own business ideas and their businesses. How to be more rational, open, and realistic about your estimates?
Oh, thank you, Andy. I love that. So if I use myself as an example, primarily I'm a writer. So before I start a book, I go to a bookshop and I look at all the titles and I try to pick a gap in the market. And I even wrote quite a lot of a book, which I thought was really interesting. But at the end of the day, I thought the message was actually quite miserable. It was about why people in their 50s and 60s get divorced and break up, and what the impact that has on the wider family. And I worked out exactly why that happens, but I thought, this is actually a pretty miserable book. I mean, yes, I can explain why if you're in your 50s, you get divorced. I can tell you what happened, but that's actually really sad. So I didn't write it. I did the research, I did the interviews, and I thought, no, I'm walking away. So I think you also always look for a gap in the market, but the danger with that is that you look for a gap in the established market. So I love Uber. Now, I don't love Uber because it takes me places. I love Uber because if you pare it back to its essentials, Uber started by saying, we're always taught as children all around the world, don't trust strangers. Don't get into a car with a stranger. Okay. When you think about it, Uber at its base is you're getting into a car with a stranger. Get into a car with someone, you get some rando, as my teenage children would put it. When you catch a taxi or a cab, you are catching a ride with a company, with a uniform, with a logo. But Uber was like, they took the concept of just jumping in a car with a random stranger and they made it commercially viable. So sometimes you have to break the mold. Sometimes you have to look at an idea and then present it in a different way. But yes, picking the gap in the market is a very, very delicate balance.
That's actually a great example, taking something that's actually considered a taboo and turning it into a successful startup.
Yeah.
Okay, moving to another question. Someone is asking, should entrepreneurs have quarterly sessions where they go back and review their goals regardless of their performance, just to see if they need to readjust it?
Such a great question. Yes, but I would add an overlay. So one thing we haven't discussed yet, and thank you so much for that question. One thing we haven't discussed yet is having an avatar. So an avatar is a person that you imagine. AI has made this much more real, but originally the idea of an avatar was, an ideal customer or someone that you think needs your product. And I love this question because I've just started lecturing at university in my hometown of Melbourne, which means my time is a little crunched. So last week I thought, okay, I need to go. Sydney is another city in Australia, and I have a lot of contacts there. I thought this is my last chance to go to Sydney and catch up with some contacts of mine and have a chat. And I met with a guy who is incredible in terms of he manages large scale finance deals. He's an incredible connector. He's an incredible entrepreneur, but he has a bit of an emotional block because he's very, very humble. He doesn't think he's very special. So he doesn't like talking about himself. So if you're a brand, a personal brand, and you don't like talking about yourself, there's a problem, right? So how is anyone supposed to hear about you if you don't promote yourself and you don't talk about yourself and you're like this hidden treasure? So we were talking about this, and I've been kind of coaching him about this for a while. And I said, okay, all right, let's forget about you being important. You don't want to be front stage. You don't want to be the big guy. You don't want to be this larger than life character, social. I get that. That's fine. So how many entrepreneurs are going to miss out and struggle because you don't want to get in front of a camera? So how many entrepreneurs are going to fail because they don't know about you? And we had this really interesting discussion, but it goes back to an avatar. So to answer the question, yes, that's a really valuable, but if you don't know the exact person that you're delivering to, that your product is for, well, then that quarterly review, unless you have really strong customer feedback, is not going to work. So I've recently rebranded my podcast, which is taking entrepreneurs from exhausted to empowered. So I'm targeting entrepreneurs who are exhausted. They've been working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for however long. They've been eating tins of beans because they're not earning any money and they're exhausted. It's like, okay, I can show you how to move from that to being empowered and moving forward. So when you do your review, we've already talked about a whole range of strategies thanks to the beautiful questions that we've had. So we've talked about going back to your assumptions, going back to, did you overestimate how much time you had? Did you underestimate the take up of the market? All of that. But the other thing is to define, okay, who is the exact person that I'm marketing to and that my product or service is good for? And then when you do that review, it's like, okay, have I served that person? Are we targeting that person? Are we even reaching that person? And then that will give that quarterly review a lot more focus.
Definitely. Okay, we actually have quite a bit of questions, so I'm gonna try to cover as many as we can during this session. Someone is asking, how can entrepreneurs balance the need to be flexible with the importance of staying committed to their goals?
Oh gosh, that's amazing. I think it's a day by day. That's a day by day juggle. I think I really love, and I think he's sadly passed away now, but I really loved Stephen Covey's book, The Seven Highly Effective Habits of Effective People. And I'm not saying that the title correctly, but in his books that he wrote, more than one, in his books he talked about the difference between important and urgent. And sadly, particularly, so for example, checking your email, you feel like it's urgent. Is it actually important? Unless you're expecting a life-changing email, we get up, we wake up, we do our thing, we turn on our laptop, our Mac, whatever, we check our email. Is that actually important? Probably not. What's important is thinking about a new product. What's important is checking your financials. What's important is who is the best person in my network to ask a question. But we perceive checking our email as urgent. It's urgent but not important. So I think that's a really important balance. I'm not sure if I've completely answered the question, but when you're reviewing your business, it's like, okay, did we actually work on what was important or what we thought was urgent? Because there's a huge difference.
Yeah, I think that sounds really great, actually. So the next question we have, it's a bit unrelated to today's topic, but I'm still gonna read it out. Ashti is asking, why don't entrepreneurs agree with products, even if the product is good, and even if they would like it coming from other companies? I'm assuming they're talking about, mass companies who would produce this thing.
Oh, I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you rephrase that?
Sure. So why don't entrepreneurs agree, or maybe why don't they seem to be, sorry, customers, why don't they seem to find a product appealing, even if you did a good job in the production, even if they would like it coming from like a big company that would produce it?
Oh, okay. So what I'm hearing is, and feel free to chat if I'm wrong. So what I'm hearing is you produce a great product, but because you're not, let's say it's makeup, because you're not L'Oreal or Estee Lauder, the consumer thinks it's not that great. Yeah. That's really tough. That's tough. So what do you do with that? Okay. So let's say it is makeup, and forgive me if it's not, but let's say it is. Well, then there's a number of ways through social media to counteract that. So you get videos of real life people who aren't supermodels. Can I just say right here, I find it so annoying when I see someone who I'm pretty sure is 16 in a photo about wrinkle cream. You have no wrinkles. It's not the cream. So you can counteract that. So I think it's like, okay, you can't defeat a really big organization, but you can counteract it. So what can you do that's different that can say, okay, and I think Instagram is really doing this very well in terms of its reels. So you have people, for example, promoting products who are not from a big organization that of a certain age and stage. I think you just have to think outside the square. And this is really the essence of entrepreneurship. It can feel really, really daunting, but just for a general rule of thumb. So if you see a huge organization, and just taking the cosmetic thing again, if they're using 16-year-olds to promote wrinkle cream, well, you get someone who's older promoting the wrinkle cream and saying, okay, I'm not 16 and this really worked for me. And then you go down the authentic path and you do something diametrically opposed. I'm trying to think of oh gosh, I'm trying to think of an example and not really working right now in terms of let me come back to it, but it's about bucking the norm. It's about doing something that's outside the square. For example, going back to Uber. I mean, Uber was like, well, you know, who would get in a car with a stranger, and then Uber may get popular. So look at that kind of very maverick thinking and thinking, okay, so who I'm competing against is marketing this a particular way. What's the opposite? And the opposite may not be appealing to customers, but thinking, okay, let's take the opposite and then look at, let's making it 10, 20, 30, 40% different and just massaging it. And then you can stand out.
Yeah, and if the answer was unclear to someone, or if you wanted to maybe follow up on it, share more detail with us so Ellie can answer you, please feel free to do so. Okay, this one is a bit of an odd question a little bit, but in an interesting way. So someone is asking, as an entrepreneur, how important is it to be aware of of political or security shifts, and how soon should we assume we need to pivot along with the circumstances? And I think that kind of applies to the general situation in the Middle East, especially in our region. Things can change very quickly in a matter of a day or a week. So yeah.
Look, I love that question, and it breaks my heart at the same time because I know your region is suffering so much and there is so much change and unwanted change. So I'm glad you've asked that question. It's really difficult. I think it really depends whether or not you believe your product or service has a political slant. I just to share some personal information to relate. So when I wrote my book, Failing Forwards, I wrote it and I was about to release it in January 2020, and then the pandemic happened. And I thought, okay, so is it irresponsible to promote a book about creating your future when the whole world seems so dark and so hopeless? And I sat on it. I didn't publish it until October because I thought I just need to see what happens. Now, I appreciate I was in a situation as an established entrepreneur where I could do that. I could wait for 9 months. And whoever's asking this question, my heart goes out to you. You may not be in that place where you can wait to generate income for 9 months to see what happens in your region. I think if you have a product that is genuinely based from a good heart and you genuinely believe it's going to contribute to people and make their lives better, then you just need to push ahead. I love that, and I connected through Savo and Hedy, who are Savo, who is CEO of 51 Labs, but we connected at the Gen conference in Melbourne, which is the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And one of the awards at that seminar was to celebrate countries who were getting entrepreneurs up and going quicker and quicker. And what I didn't know was Ukraine was nominated. So to be an entrepreneur in Ukraine, the barriers to being an entrepreneur have been significantly reduced. And I think it was, forgive me if I have these details wrong, but it was 3 days. In 3 days, you could get up and have an entrepreneurship business. And I remember feeling very humbled that in a country which was being devastated, very similar to countries in the Middle East, that they valued the entrepreneurship journey. So I think you just press on. I mean, there's never a great time to release a product or a service, and there's never a bad time. So if you genuinely believe in your heart, and in my work, I talk a lot about your inner justification. If you believe that what you are offering to your community is a benefit, well, then it's going to be of benefit no matter what is happening.
Thank you. I think this was actually really inspiring, even for, organizations like us, or, Orange Corners, because, these things can affect everyone. And I think a lot of our entrepreneurs are aware of those things that can become a factor in how you know, can deliver to these entrepreneurs and be, of help to them. So I think with this, we're kind of coming to the end of the session. And I just wanted to say that thank you so, so much for joining us in this session. I think this was really inspiring and very informative. I hope everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did and our team did. Um, just thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, Ellie. And is there anything that you would like to say?
Oh, look, it's been such a treat. I mean, I am committed to supporting entrepreneurs everywhere. I think entrepreneurs will change the world for the better. And it's a hard and sometimes lonely and very difficult journey. So anything I can do to help that along the way is a passion of mine. If there's any questions that you didn't get to ask, or you think I should have offered some more information, just message me on my LinkedIn profile and I will be delighted to assist. But I really truly believe it's entrepreneurs that will change the world for the better. And for everyone out there who is maybe a little despondent and your entrepreneurship journey isn't turning out the way you hoped, you are in very good company, because every single entrepreneur I've met around the world feels the same way. So hang in there, and anything I can do to help, I'd be really, really honored to do that.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. And it's always a pleasure to have you with us. We appreciate that you dedicated the time for this. And like she said, her LinkedIn is shared in the Zoom emails that have been sent to you guys. So feel free to reach out if you have any further questions. And I guess that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.